Hello, everybody. I'm Manmohan Sharma. Today, I'm here to give a webinar on remote product management and the framework that we will be using for remote program management is an OCD framework, which is not an obsessive compulsive disorder, but it's organize, communicate, and delegate. These are the three components that we'll use today to decide how to manage product management in a remote environment. So let me give you a brief background about me before getting into the topic. Yeah, so guys, my name is Manmohan Sharma, and I'm currently leading a cross-border product at Amazon. I've been working with Amazon since 2015 after completing my MBA from Michigan Ross School of Business, and have been working across many innovative orgs in Amazon, when they were there in their infancy, such as Prime Now, Amazon Logistics, and more recently Amazon Global Store, where I'm leading the development of new product that will improve the customer experience of our international customers. And prior to MBA, I have held software engineering positions in Amway, Walgreens, and Tata Consultancy Services across India, Korea, and the United States. So that has been my experience till date. Now let's dive into the topic for today. So what makes a PM job complex? That's as you can see in this picture, it shows the ambiguity, and dealing and resolving ambiguity across all the stakeholders is the number one thing that every product manager has to go through. And as you can see, nobody likes to tolerate ambiguity. So the first thing that makes PM job complex is dealing with ambiguity. And as a PM, it is our responsibility to resolve the ambiguity for all our stakeholders. Otherwise, getting their support for a product will be a far-fetched idea, because every stakeholder is expecting a product manager to come up with a clear objective of the project and resolve all the ambiguity for them. And at Amazon, we are always working on problems that have never been solved before, which amplifies this complexity even further. I remember during my early days at Amazon, when I was getting accustomed to Amazon's environment, my condition was very similar to the one shown in this picture. Working remotely makes this even more difficult to resolve the ambiguity, because you are deprived of those small talks that you can have in the hallway with your colleagues, teammates, that helps you build your knowledge and helps you understand the problem space. Remote work makes everything more formal, because you have to go into a meeting with an agenda. Developing a similar environment remotely is difficult. And I still remember when I was writing my first document at Amazon, just a 5-minute hallway conversation with a colleague converted my document from not so great to wow in 2 days. We were discussing about the structure of the document. The document had all the components. It was just the structure that was missing. Just a 5-minute conversation with my colleague changed the entire thing. So dealing with ambiguity and resolving it for your stakeholders is the number one challenge that a PM job entails, which is amplified with this work from home scenario or the remote product management. The second thing that is related to the complexity of managing multiple stakeholders. As you can see in this picture, there are multiple stakeholders that a product manager is managing at any given point of time. So right from finance to customers to executives to public policy, at any given point of time, I'm working across like 10 different stakeholders, which makes the job complex. Now, we have to make sure that all these stakeholders are aligned with our vision and are willing to support us in developing and executing the product. And when you are in office, you can see most of them on a day-to-day basis, which helps to develop that report. You can go there, you can meet them, you can discuss, have informal chats, which helps to develop that comfort, that trust with your stakeholders. Now, all of this is lost when you are in a remote environment, making it more challenging to gain trust and support for your project. Now, these are the two things that I believe are really, really amplified when you're working in a remote environment. And fortunately, I have been working in a remote setup since the start of my career, like in one form or the other. Like for example, when I was in India, I was as a software engineer. We had onshore teams in US. The client was in US, so we used to work through that remote setup. So I've gained those skills that are required to be successful in a remote environment. And and I've been using a framework which is slightly different from this one, which is known as Organize, Delegate, Communicate, to manage remote software teams. When I was a software development manager in my older days, and I've written an article on it on LinkedIn if you guys are interested in reading. And for this presentation, I thought, like, what is the best way to tell about remote product management. And I think that the content of that article are still valid. It's just that I have modified the framework a little bit, which coincides with like what remote product management entails. And so that's where this framework of organize, communicate, and delegate comes into picture. Now, the organize part of the framework deals with resolving ambiguity, and the communicate and delegate part is about managing and convincing your stakeholders and their expectations. Let's dive into these three components and see what is in there. Yeah, so let's start by diving into the first component of this framework, which is organize. We all know organizing is the key to any successful project, but it becomes even critical when you are managing multiple stakeholders remotely. Organizing the information will help you gain trust from your stakeholders, which was comparatively easier when you were in office and could have just asked the status about the project or gathered data casually from your stakeholders by going to their office or desk, whatever. When you are working remotely, you have to be extra cautious in making sure that all your stakeholders have the same information, and doing your homework and writing it down goes a long way in establishing this trust. The first stage of the framework involves organizing all the information associated with the product, feature, that is, support you need for the product, your key stakeholders, document, data, and putting it in a format that can be understood by everybody. In this stage, you will go about creating the product roadmaps, business requirement documents, and with every possible detail that you have. And at Amazon, we write 6 pages, which help us organize our thoughts effectively. And during the pandemic, I realized that writing these documents have actually helped us do our work effectively, even in a remote setup. I don't know how we could have done it in any other way. Now, if you see the different components of the organize, we have subject deep dive, identify stakeholder, quantitative and qualitative data. So all of these things, when organized, gives you a perspective. It gives you the knowledge required to have a good trust with your stakeholders. You assemble the team in this stage to determine where do you store the documents, so that your project team can access those documents. Your tech teams can know where the BRDs are placed, where the roadmap is there. And then, like, basically establishing communication channels like Slack, for like which you can create a similar environment like hallway conversation by creating Slack channels where you are interacting with a smaller group of your product team, or creating a larger group where you can have more informal conversations. And finally, in this stage, you will start creating your vision documents, your roadmaps, your BRDs, which will help you communicate your ideas, your thought process to your audience and your stakeholders. And these things are important even when you are doing non-remote product management, but some of these components become very, very important when you are working in a remote environment. For example, like document storage or communication channels, or identifying right stakeholders and doing a subject deep dive will be required for you to organize your product roadmap effectively. Now, coming on to the second part of the framework, which is the communicate. The second part of the framework basically deals with effective communication with all your stakeholders. And that is particularly important when you are remotely managing stakeholders for delivering products. Using tools such as whiteboard, features, screen sharing, documents can help communicate your thought process to your stakeholders. so that they can align with your vision and provide support required for successful launch of your product. Some of the tools that have worked for me include like chat groups for informal communication. So I usually, whenever I start a new product, working on a new product, I create some informal communication channels between, say, our finance teams, marketing teams, and if there is a cross between, like, say, our operations team and our tech teams, I create some informal communication groups which act as in a similar manner that our hallway conversations could do, to communicate with them and create a lighter environment where nobody's like judging you all the time. And then second thing that have worked really well for me is doing a screen sharing and video calling. So for example, I was working on a project recently where I had to create basically to communicate my vision. I had to create the entitlement for a project. Now I created the entitlement, communicated it to the stakeholders, and then like what I did was I basically set up a meeting with all my stakeholders, by doing a screen sharing. I helped them walk through the mental model, how I was thinking through it, and how I arrived at the entitlement that was supposed to that was related to the product. Now, once you do that, the other component is the data-driven stories. What I mean by data-driven stories is that till now, what we have been doing is like we have been keeping data separate and like communicating your vision, which I call stories, separate. But creating these data-driven stories together, where you are communicating your stories through the data, creates a big impact on your stakeholders, especially in a remote environment where it's difficult for them to understand your features, your expressions, your day-to-day like interactions. Data-driven stories helps to communicate that vision effectively, by where you have the stories, but at the same time you have anecdotes as well as the data to communicate your point through. Then the other thing that we should do on a regular basis, especially in a remote environment, is having a daily sync up with your tech teams on the progress that they are making, having a weekly, bi-weekly meetings with your stakeholders, including your leadership teams, so that everybody is abreast with like what is going on in the project and or the product roadmap. And then the final thing is the status updates. It's always helpful if you send regular status updates to your stakeholders, so that they know where you stand, where the product is moving. Is it moving in the right direction? Is there any help needed from leadership? So these are all the tools that will help you communicate things effectively with your tech teams as well as with your business teams. So as a product manager, you are dependent on your tech and business teams to deliver the product. So effective delegation is important. And that's the third step of this framework, which focuses on assigning the roles and responsibilities in the product roadmap in collaboration with your tech and business teams. So now the collaboration is very important here, because unless and until your tech and business stakeholders are hand in hand with you right from the start when you're building your roadmap, it becomes difficult to get their buy-in. And even if you get their buy-in, there are some things that you will only realize once you have started executing the product. For example, in one of my products, we started working on it, and right in the middle, we realized there was something that was missed in the design phase. So we had to go back, do the design work again, and then come back and start working on that feature. So those things can be avoided if you have engaged your tech and business stakeholders right from the start. And then there are certain steps that you can take. For example, developing an effective delegation plan and assigning key POCs, stakeholders, and leadership to that plan. Brainstorming with your tech and business teams to break down the roadmap into smaller features. Assigning ownership of individual components to identified POCs based on their alignment with them. And then basically developing a tracker. It doesn't have to be an extensive like a tracker, but a simple Excel sheet with roles and responsibilities should help you effectively delegate the responsibilities. So in the end, the key takeaways from this presentation are first of all, organizing for success, because organizing your product components will help you stay in control of your roadmap and will help you in aligning everybody with your vision. The second thing is communicating effectively. Now, communicating efficiently and using the right channels goes a long way in building trust. For example, like developing these Slack groups or whatever channel you use to communicate, creating mini groups for communication, screen sharing, video calling. All those help to build that trust that we used to build when we were interacting in face-to-face in our office days. The third component is delegating effectively and following up with your stakeholders. And that's why if you see there is a constant arrow between back and forth between communicate and delegate, which says that there should be a continuous follow-up between the different stakeholders that you have assigned the work to. I think that's the OCD framework, which can help you organize your product roadmaps effectively in a remote environment. Thank you, everybody. And I have my LinkedIn link here in case you want to connect and ask any further questions. Thank you.